I'm not going to sit yet. Would everyone like to stand up and take a stretch for a second? Yeah, like as you're stretching, thank you, yes. I want to take you out of your data brains. You know, we've been doing like a lot of data brain stuff, and I just, you know, you don't have to be quiet, I'll just talk over you. Let's get out of your data brains and into whatever other brain you have, like your emotional intelligence brain or your intuition brain. Okay, yeah, so I just wanted to say that. You can stand or sit. Here's what I want to say to you. Thank you.
Really high. It's a really tall chair.
It is. But it's warmer up here.
Yes,
Michael Kaiser was so amazing this morning, and it was fascinating. Yeah, okay, yes. It was fascinating to hear him talk about changing organizations. Riveting to hear how he turned around the Royal Opera. But Michael Kaiser's Michael Kaiser, right? I mean, how do we do that? How do you create change in your organizations? Show of hands, how many of you have met challenges when trying to create change in your organizations? Yeah. So I thought I would canvass some people downstairs and kind of ask them this question. So here's the question I asked them. When you have tried to create change at your organizations and met resistance or obstacles, what does that sound like? And here's what people said. But this is the way we've always done it. Let's not risk it. Oh, by the way, this is the way we've always done it. Everybody said that. Everybody I asked said that. What if it doesn't work? People won't be able to handle it. I also asked some of you, what do you want to take away from today? And what they said is, what do I say to start the conversation around change? I want to know I'm not alone. How do I handle my own emotions without becoming demoralized and exhausted? Anyone know the term VUCA? VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It's a term coined by the American military after the collapse of the Soviet Union, then appropriated by the corporate world to kind of describe what it's like to do business in the digital age. It's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Things are moving so fast, it's hard to keep up with them. So I think that applies to all of us in the arts as well. We heard Michael Kaiser say, we can't just do what we did yesterday. Change is inevitable, and it's also uncomfortable. So how will we handle it? How will you handle it? Okay, so I would like you, I know you're busily writing and typing, I would like you to stop doing that, please, and close your eyes. We're going to do a little, very short mindfulness exercise. Okay, why are we going to do that? Because it takes focus, commitment, and courage to create change. And you've got to be in the right headspace. So we're going to do, maybe some of you have done a 5-2-7 breathing exercise before. In for a count of 5 through your nose, hold for 2, and blow out through your mouth for 7. And we're going to do 3 of those starting now. Hold, 2, and out. And again. Last time. Right on. Okay. So We have a fantastic panel here today, and our goal is for you to come away with some not only profiles and courage from these people, but also actionable strategies on how to create change. So I'm just going to remind you guys, please, to tell everyone who you are and what your role is and what your organization is. So as Eric kind of already set us up, I often hear from colleagues and clients, I'm sold on the need for change, but I can't get buy-in from the board, my boss, my team. What can I do? Can you tell us about some opportunities, some examples of times you've tried to create change and overcome resistance?
Okay, I'll start. Hi, I'm Terry Freeman. I'm president of the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, Tennessee at the Lorraine Motel, which was the assassination site of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So that is what my day job is. I've been at the museum for 5 years, and the museum was founded in 1991. And one of the big, well, no, not one, our only major fundraising event has been the same since 1991. And so I got there in 2014, actually about a month prior to the event, and it is a fabulous event. It's called the Freedom Award. And they honor icons of the movement, those that are still living, as well as what we call new movement makers, people doing the work now around the issues of civil and human rights. And it was a ceremony, an award ceremony in one location, and then everybody would walk over to another location and have a chicken dinner. And I was like, I can't. I just cannot do this. First off, by the time you finish with the award ceremony, it's like 9:30. Who wants to eat dinner at 9:30 at night, right? So me and my new self decided we're gonna change this Freedom Award, right? Well, you would have thought I was saying that I myself was gonna get rid of the National Civil Rights Museum. But I was determined because I knew I had talked to people in the community who attended the event who would say to me quietly, if you can change that event, I'll give you more money. So I got word of the fact that our convention center actually was going to be renovated. And I thought, that's it. I don't need to know dates. And I went to the board and said, look, we can't risk the potential of having an event in the middle of a build out of the convention center. So we need to move the location. And in order to move the location, we don't have another place big enough to have a dinner. So we're going to have a reception at the front end and then move people into the ceremony. Well, they were like, we don't like this, but we're going to go ahead and let you do this. I could no more change that event back to a dinner now than the man in the moon. So it was incredibly successful. It was painful. I had an earful constantly, but I actually did kind of say, I'm going to have to go with the whole forgiveness versus permission, because the event was just too staid, too dated, didn't have any vibrancy to it. And it's interesting because now there are more people in the city who are having events that are more on the style of the event that we are having. So that was I jumped into it thinking this was not going to be hard, but it was a little harder than I anticipated. But it turned out to be very successful, and we've raised more money since.
So I'm hearing, when it comes to the obstacles and the resistance you heard from the board,
we always did it this way. 1991 to 2016.
And you just pressed ahead.
Yeah. I could maybe not be sitting here today.
Okay, yeah, so a little risk involved. Yeah, who else?
I guess I can go next. Yeah, I'm Andrew Haynes, Director of Marketing and Communications at Seattle Rep. We used to be Seattle Repertory Theater. Part of our changes, we changed our name. We've changed a lot of things in the last couple of years. It's interesting because I've been there for 4 years and I came in at a time of change. We had recently seen major turnover in our leadership with our managing director and artistic director at the same time, so there was a lot of transition. But when I arrived, one of the things that was most apparent was that we were in desperate need of a new website. Richie, who oversees our website, is in the audience today, and I remember sitting down with Richie and he gave me an earful of information that was actually very useful. So I immediately started talking to our managing director about, can we do this? Should we do this? Well, there wasn't a question in my mind. And he was on board, which was great. So I had buy-in from him. But presenting it to the board was a little bit more of a challenge because, as many of you know, a website is extremely expensive. And we didn't need to just make some minor changes or adapt the website. We needed to start over. It was time to build from scratch. We didn't have a mobile first or mobile responsive website. Richie was our CMS system. We jokingly say that Richie was the CMS. Thank you, Richie. Truly, like any change, he had to go in and make those changes. We didn't have a CMS. So, we really had to start over. But when we talked to the board about it, because it was expensive, they really were apprehensive. And they didn't understand why we needed a new website. They said, well, didn't we just get one? And it's like, well, actually, we didn't. But, and it's also, this is evolving technology. And at the same time, we also knew we needed to do a rebrand that would coincide with that. And when we brought up the idea of a rebrand, that was also met with resistance. And so in hearing those responses, what I learned is that I really needed to build a case. And it was almost like creating a campaign to make this change happen. I was really lucky that, again, that the managing director was on board and I didn't have to persuade him. Also that, the staff, everybody was on board in that regard. It was really about convincing the board to okay and sign off on this major price tag and that it was okay for us to do that. And, of course, the biggest question that I got was, what's the ROI? What are we going to, tell us what the metrics are. Tell us all the measurements. And then maybe we'll say yes to it. But it was about a 3-year process, and in earnest, probably about 2 to 2.5 years. So I built the case. I also, I had to learn. There were different areas of resistance. So, like one board member, this was what they were fixated on, and then maybe another board member was thinking about this. So I would have to have one-on-one meetings with them and really kind of explain it. Again, I would go to Richie a lot and say, how do I qualify this? What kind of information can you give me to make this happen? Ultimately, we got there. Long story short, we were able to really kind of to get to that place. One of the things that I will say that was really helpful was that I had Eric come out, and Eric came out to talk primarily about digital marketing, but I said to him, because he knew we were in the process of trying to get approval for a website, and we've been talking to Jane and to folks at Capacity a lot about it, and they had also said, like when I arrived, they were like, you need a new website. There are things we can't do, and so I'm like, yeah, okay. So when Eric came out, I said, hey, I want you to come out and talk to our board about digital marketing so that they really have a good understanding of it. But can you also just talk a little bit about the website and why it would be important, and just kind of put that in there a little bit. He did it so well that after the presentation, for months, people would come to me and say, we love that website guy. We love that guy that came to talk about the website. And it's like, and I'm like, well, there was more. Yes, that's great. So then I knew that they were on board with the website. So long story short, yes, we just launched our website at the end of August. Please, seattlerep.org. It's fantastic. We're very pleased with it, and now we're doing all kinds of metrics and analytics that we couldn't do before. So it's very exciting.
So I'm hearing, this is what I do as a coach, I like recap what people say. So I'm hearing that you made your case.
Yeah.
That you took like a very specific approach. You, like a marketer, you knew your audience and you did a lot of thin slices,
Yeah.
right? You knew who had what objection and you tried to meet them with whatever information would overturn that objection.
Yeah.
I would also ask you, right, so here's Eric and you were able to bring in an expert. Did you feel intimidated by or concerned about your own standing? by bringing in an expert when theoretically you're the expert?
No. I mean, for me personally, no. I mean, I actually feel like the more people, the better, and the more experts that can come in and build a case. Because again, this is not, I mean, a process such as this doesn't, it's not one person, right? And I will say, you know, like I heard from Capacity, I heard from Richie and other members of the staff that we needed this new website. I started to do my research and learn what we needed to do. And then when we were launching into it, it was also talking to a variety of people and doing our research, so we made sure that we went with the right agency. You know, we didn't, you know, we really were thoughtful about it, and you can't do that on your own. And it's like, and we also, I mean, like, we had an amazing team on staff that was able to work with the agency. It was a very collaborative effort, and that was actually, in choosing a website agency, that was paramount for us, because we are a very collaborative organization. We wanted to be a part of that process. We didn't want to be told what to do. We wanted to be a part of that conversation. So no, I mean, it's a long answer to your question, but it's
Good.
yeah.
A lot of people are writing. Yeah. So, I mean, that's not an easy thing to do. You know, often when we're embedded in an organization, we feel we're the experts and people should, you know, take our word for it, except that often they don't. So it does take a measure of humility to be able to do that, and it served you. Yeah.
Thanks.
What about you, Lynette?
Yeah, I'm Lynette Shy. I'm the marketing director at Ballet Met. We're in Columbus, Ohio. We are obviously a ballet company. We're about $6.5 million, and we put on 6 different shows a year. We have an academy, and we have an education and outreach program. So I think I'm going to go way back. I've been at Ballet Met for 9 years now, and I took over the department about 6 years ago. And when I took over the department, we had a $0 digital budget. I had direct mail campaigns, which I know are still effective, but they are extremely expensive. So when I started looking at my budget, I started following the money, and that's where I went first. One of the biggest expenses I had was a subscription campaign, trade mailing, that they did it because they had always done it. They did it because they had always done it at Ballet Met. But it cost $40,000 for us to send out these trades. And there was no data telling me how many subscriptions I was getting off of these trades. So that was the first thing that I did, is I started following the path. It took a lot of collaboration. It took a lot of work with other departments. But lo and behold, we found out we sold 4 subscriptions for $400 for a $40,000 campaign. So when you do that, you can very easily go to your boss and say, we just spent $39,900 and whatever dollars, and we basically wasted all of this money, and we just threw it out the window. So that, for me, was a very effective way of proving that that wasn't going to work. So we've now, you know, fast forward some years, and we're almost all digital now. I do have to prove it still to this day. I always have board members that I didn't see the ad in the Columbus Dispatch, that's our town newspaper. And so I did one year, I ran an ad we were doing a version of The Wizard of Oz. And I bought a half-page ad in our newspaper. It cost me $5,000. And I put a code for 50% off tickets. And I sold 7. So again, I was able to go to that board member and tell them, obviously, it's a lot cheaper for us to do this kind of advertising digitally, where I can show you, you know, look at the ROI on this, and it's super, super high. And that's basically, I always follow the data.
Follow the data, right. So, because I think the devil is in the details for, you know, a lot of people out here, I'm curious about process. When you've tried to, and you've spoken to this a little bit, when you've tried to move change forward, what kind of processes are you using? How are you communicating? You know, often in, you know, these days in tech, we talk about an iterative process or move fast and break things. What are the processes that you guys have used?
You want to start? Sure, I can start. You know, it's interesting. I mean, this is not a direct answer to the question, but I was thinking a little bit more about when you were talking too. I think for me, it's about, I realized with the website, for instance, that there was resistance, but I also had to put myself in the place of the board member and not just say, oh, they just don't want to do it, and oh, bad board member, because that's not the case. They're actually coming at it from a fiduciary responsibility, right? They're thinking about the money that it costs, and so I had to kind of turn my head around and not say it's us versus them or that they're against me. It's really more about trying to understand their perspective and why their perspective is what it is, so that I can then have a dialogue and conversation about that, and come at it from their perspective and angle. And I think that's the case with anything that when you're trying to create change. I mean, change can be scary, and there's a lot of fear around change, but change is inevitable. And so, I mean, you know, it's often said the only consistent is change, you know, and so you have to be able to think about, well, why is it scary or why is it fearful? You know, for one board member, it might be, well, you know, maybe this is going to put us in debt, right? Or, you know, whatever it might be, or whatever what the situation might be. So for me, I think I always start with why is there resistance, and why are you opposed to this, so that we can have a dialogue about it.
Yeah, Terry.
I was just going to say that, and I apologize. There's so many people on this side.
I know,
but
I know.
I turn my whole body because the mic is on this side, so that's why I have my back to you. But you know, change. The only way you're going to affect change really is to communicate the change, and everybody has to be a part of that. And I have learned over time that sometimes we communicate very well to certain levels with regard to whatever the change is going to be. And I think when it comes to the board, since they're a big part of my constituency as president of the organization, you know, I try to almost over-communicate in a lot of ways to get them on board. We have just recently gone through a strategic plan for the next 3 years, and one of the big goals that came out of it was that we needed to have a board that was a 21st century board for a museum that you want to remain relevant. We are a museum of history and culture. Interestingly, if you've come to the museum, the pictures you see in the museum are not that different, unfortunately, than some of the pictures that we've seen in the news over the past several years. So there is a natural relevance, but you've got to want to do things a little differently than we did in 1991. So I think there is a bit of a, in trying to create the change with the board. It's interesting how many board members will say, yes, you're right, we need to change this board. They need to go. And I'm thinking, well, no, we need to be a little bit more holistically looking at this. But I do think that sometimes it's about how often and how much you communicate it. And I actually think it is important to bring in people who are third parties, who can say what you know is the right thing, and they'll be heard differently than you will. So for me, it's always kind of about who's the expert that I can bring in who is going to verify or add some more credibility to what I have to say with regard to changes. But process for me with regard to any change, from the smallest to the largest, is really about communicating and communicating it throughout the entire organization, from the board level to security at the front door.
And can I just probe that too? Because you know what I heard from some of you out here, you're leading an organization. So you're talking both about communicating to your board and trying to change opinion up. How do you communicate, cascade that communication throughout the organization? One of the things I've experienced myself, and I think people in the room have experienced, is feeling in the dark about what the leader's plans are, or what the vision is. What's your perspective on that, and how have you done it?
Well, first of all, everyone in the organization knows when board meetings occur. Everyone knows who the board members are. And we have monthly staff meetings. So following the board meetings, I recap what took place at the board. Now, they don't always need all the gory details, but they need to know the things that are important to them. So it took us about 8 months to go through the strategic planning process, which the staff was a part of, but they also knew that all of that stuff had to go up, right? And then come back down. So we made a point of dedicating staff meeting time specifically to talking about this is where the board is on these areas. These are the things that we're in congruence on. These are the things where there is some difference of opinion on, and just making sure that they understand that. That said, when you are far removed from the board and they become the board, the big scary board, right? There are some things that you'll never really understand fully when the board makes a decision about something that doesn't seem like it makes any sense to you at all. Sometimes you can't bridge that difference. And sometimes what I have to say to the staff is, I need you to trust me a little bit and know that I have your best interest at heart. But it's not about you, it's about the organization. And sometimes what is good for the organization is not always good for every individual in the organization. So they're just, I try to be very real with the staff. I also try to be very real with the board so that there is some understanding that the communication that they're hearing from me is not totally different based on the audience that I'm talking to.
Thank you. You want to weigh in, Lynette?
On process?
Yeah, sure. Communication, process.
I think one of the things that maybe is a little different for me is I don't have quite the budget to bring experts in all the time, so I had to become the expert. And so I do that through coming to boot camp and watching webinars and trying to stay on the forefront of everything that's going on in the industry from a marketing standpoint and in the industry from an arts standpoint. And then, quite like you, I build a case. So I might be, if you could see my brain, I think everybody would be scared. Because I might have like 50, and I'm not even kidding, different things that I'm working on all at the same time, but I'm laying groundwork based on different things all at once. So I might be talking to a board member about this one. I might pull a slide presentation from a boot camp presentation a couple years ago and put it into something that's going to senior management. I might do, I do all these different things. So I'm constantly marketing to them, doing what we do to them too, so.
Lots of success stories. What about when things went wrong? Sometimes we try to change things, we try to get buy-in, it doesn't work. I'm curious, has anyone up here ever had a fail?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And this was prior to working at the museum. I was president of the Community Foundation in Washington, D.C. And I was in that role for 18 years. And at one point, I made the decision that the structure needed to be modified some because it was just too many people, frankly, reporting to me and me trying to carry on everything. So I made the decision that one of the individuals really, really good when you talk about process, oh my God, just fabulous around process. Give her something to do, her mind just thought in a different way than mine did, and I knew I was gonna get the exact right product. So put her in the role of COO. And so I now had the CFO, the COO reporting to me, and then my program folks and my development folks and others reported up through the COO. Oh my God, it was the worst failure ever. I mean, really, really horrible. To the point where I had really good people who worked for me saying, I'm gonna leave. I cannot do this. They were like, yeah, she's really good with process, but she doesn't know how to treat people. But she managed up very, very well. So what I was seeing and what they were seeing were totally different. And I started really being observant because I was concerned I was going to be losing some really, really good people. And I had to unwind my decision. It was not easy to do. I had a long relationship with that individual, but literally she was destroying the organization. And so I had to make a very unpopular decision. She was very popular with board members. It created the most stress that I think I have ever had to work under. And I think what I learned from that situation was that I acted too quickly. I should have taken more time to really figure out what are the stress points, Terry, that are creating this situation where you're feeling like you're not managing well. It wasn't just to automatically decide, oh, well, everybody else has a COO, so I need a COO. And so I learned a really important lesson. I think I also really kind of fine-tuned my ability to deliver some really difficult information. Not just, and to receive it as well, because I got all sorts of blowback from my board. But it was a hard lesson learned. Never do that again.
So maybe go more slowly.
Definitely, definitely. I've been told you should hire slowly and fire quickly.
Other stories of
Go ahead.
Well,
fire?
I would just say that I don't know if I have a story per se, but I would just say that for me, I think that when you don't have a success or when you have a failure, I said this in preparation for this. I think I've learned more from failure than I have from success. And so I always want to embrace failure because you're going to learn, and I don't think you can move forward without that failure, and you can learn how to do it better the next time. And like, really to your point of the things you had to learn, and you couldn't just say, well, I feel like I need the COO because other people have it. I mean, it's, for me, it's really about having to, we're always learning, and we're always getting new information.
Is failure a necessary part of change?
I think so.
How do you create an environment in which it's okay to fail and make a mistake? Lynette,
Yeah, I know that's
I don't
scary.
know, any
I knew you were
ideas?
going to look at me first.
For anyone?
I mean, I think it depends on, my team, I hope, feels very safe making decisions and pushing boundaries and bringing ideas that are out of the norm to me. So I want them to know that they're very, very safe making those decisions. It might be a little bit different for me, taking them up the ladder. So I think it's do your homework and do your best to have the data to support what you're trying to do, to make the changes, and sometimes just take the leap.
I'm hearing from you that you feel that on your team, you can create that environment. And I think that's worth saying. You're not yet the CEO of your organization, right? But that you can create a subculture inside, not that your culture isn't like that, but whatever your culture is, you also have the power to create a subculture that is safe enough where people can make mistakes.
Yeah, for sure.
I think you also can institutionalize it. We have in our plan, our operational plan, an objective that says, give yourself time to be bold and creative. Well, bold and creative, if it's truly bold and creative, will probably fail a couple of times, right? Things don't get created always at the first time out. And it really does give people the room and the space to be thoughtful and think about what are the things that we might want to do, or suggest new programs, or think of different ways of having our audiences curate exhibits around issues that are presenting themselves in the news from one moment to the next. And knowing that unless they are taking some ridiculous type of risk that puts the organization in jeopardy, that they're not going to be, there's no punitive measures that are going to be taken. And I think that that's institutionalizing the idea of flexibility and having an environment that at least tolerates a certain level of risk is really important. And one of the things that I do is I do insulate my folks from the board, because again, when you don't know them, it becomes this scary thing. And I say to them all the time, you all don't worry about the board. I got that. You all do your job. And then if I need to come back and tell you that we got to modify or adjust something, then we'll do that. But you know, nothing really good was ever created by being safe.
That's right.
And for some of the things and the issues in which I find myself working in, community issues around justice and poverty, if we don't make some bold and creative decisions around this, nothing is going to ever change. And that's the type of environment I try to foster.
I think that, again, like you have to take risk, and you can't move forward if you don't take that risk. And sometimes it's not going to succeed, but at least you tried, and at least you put it out there.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I guess an example would be we recently did a social media campaign that we thought would do really well, and it didn't. And you know, Allison, who's here, who's our social media manager, you know, we talked about this campaign, and with Angela, our creative director, who is also here. Hello, everyone. I like to call everybody out. We have a great team. But you know, like we thought this campaign was going to take off, and it didn't. But at least we tried something, right? And at least we put it out there, and we didn't just say, oh well, you know. I mean, like, and we learned and you know, there was, you know. Allison sent me an email wrapping it up saying we're going to end this campaign. Here are the lessons that I've learned from doing this. Next time if we try something. And I think that that's really important. I once had a boss who was very innovative and was like, let's just try whatever and not be afraid of the risk. And you know, as a marketer, for me, I think it's also, some of the fear comes out of the language that we use. So I don't like to think about it as failure. Yeah. I really like to think about it as learning. And I also don't necessarily like the word change. I like to think of it as innovation. Because change has a connotation to it of, oh, things are changing, that's not good. And so, you know, and even like with our rebrand, when we were doing our rebrand, we knew that there's so much wrapped around, you know, it's interesting what Michael Kaiser was talking about this morning in marketing the institution, because that's exactly what the approach we were taking with our rebrand. And we were tying together actually our programming and our institution. And that was a major step for us. And we knew that there were going to be board members that were going to have a challenge with this. And I wish I could have come up with this, but on my marketing committee, for our board, we were talking about this with the marketing committee, and I'm lucky that my committee they're all marketers, and so they're always on board. So we were talking about how to talk about the rebrand and it not being this big scary thing with the trustees. And one of our committee members said, well, it's an evolution, not a revolution. We're not revolting, right? You know, and I was like, well, that's brilliant. So we now use that term all the time. And so I think it's really it's getting back down to the terminology. You've got to try things. You've got to set it up so that it seems safe and it doesn't seem like it's this big scary thing.
One more thing, I'm going to chime in. Yeah. You have to be prepared to pivot. So we talked about this too. We are constantly changing, and we're not afraid of it as a team because we know that we're going to have to. So I say pivot, pivot, pivot. Always be on the lookout. If something's not working, we switch it up. It's just constant.
I'd love to hear from you guys. I'm a little early on questions, but I love questions. So could we maybe, sorry, I'm throwing a wrench into here's one here in the middle.
Thank you all. That was incredibly helpful. I think most of us in this room are in this business because we're super passionate about whatever we do. So what advice do you have for not taking failure or change or success too personally?
How can you not take it personally?
It's always personal, right?
I mean,
Yes.
you know, I mean, really, because you want it to work, right? You had this great idea. It was the right thing. You knew it was the right thing. I think you just have to recognize that not everyone is going to work, but some of them are. And I think what we have to really do is take some time to evaluate all of the steps that led up to whatever the final product was, to find out, okay, something happened here. What happened? Why didn't this work? Was it an external issue? Was it an internal issue? I think we have to kind of be objective, but I think it's not realistic. Human beings are fragile people. We're fragile, right? We're very fragile. And so, of course, our ego is going to hurt a little when it doesn't work out. But I guarantee you what you'll do is you'll take that experience and then you'll apply it to something else, and something else will work.
Yeah, I'm going to chime in and say celebrate your wins too. I mean, in this lifestyle, and I'm saying lifestyle because we are passionate about what we do, so we work all the time and the work never ends, right? Celebrate when it goes well. Celebrate when you make goals. Celebrate when your campaign does what it wants to do. I think I know for us, a lot of times we're like, yay, and then we move on. So like really more, celebrate more of the yays.
I would also add that I take it personally when I haven't done something and we don't succeed. So for me, I would rather fail trying than not trying at all. And because I would hate to go to my managing director or to our board and say, this show we didn't sell, we didn't meet our goal, and I also didn't take any risks and I didn't try anything. At least I can go and say, here are the 5 things we tried. None of them worked, but we tried. But I'm going to take it more personally and feel like I didn't do my job if I don't take the risk.
Thank you guys.
Hi, I'm Justin. I'm the communications director at Counterpulse, a performing arts space in San Francisco. So we have a very ambitious and innovative team, and we take a lot of risks, perhaps too many. So we're constantly rebranding our gala to a benefit. We're doing new brochures. We're launching new programs. And I have been at the organization longer than some other people who come in and are wanting to be innovative and take ambitions. And I sense myself kind of going back to the institutional knowledge of, well, we tried it this way, maybe we shouldn't go back, or let's just stick with the default because it's what our audience is used to, this sort of branding. So I'm trying to negotiate a way of having an institutional knowledge, but still honoring our iterative and innovative nature. And yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
It's a hard one.
It's a hard one.
That is a hard one.
Your change is to not change as much. Is that right? I mean, your change is not to change as often and not to do as much change, it sounds like.
Yeah, we're always trying to innovate and take risks. It's literally our tagline, shatter assumptions and be risk taking. So I'm like, maybe let's take less risk.
I'm curious, does anyone in the audience have a thought
Yeah, I don't know if I can answer that.
for
There's a
you?
hand
Yeah.
up there.
Yeah, there's-
This is a response to that. Who? Yeah.
Oh, I think you need time to measure success. If you keep changing too quickly, you're not going to have the time to look at the results and analyze the data to know if the next decision that you make is.
Can you hear that? Okay, so we need a mic over here. You need time to measure, to get data. So I would posit that this might be a communications issue. I'm not the expert here, I'm just the moderator, but maybe I'll just weigh in. What would it be like for you to be transparent about what you're thinking? I fear all of this innovation all at once. And open your conversation that way and think about saying, you know what, I think we could handle 2 new things this year and 2 more new things next year, and let's have a vote on what everyone thinks is the right path, or something like that. How does that land for you, with a thumbs up or thumbs down? Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you guys so much for sharing all this information. One of the things I'm curious about is when you're trying to implement complex change, and oftentimes, that, as you guys have said, you kind of have to pitch that to your team and implement it incrementally. So I'm curious how you go about doing that without losing that focus or that sense of urgency about that change, because you want to make that monumental change for a reason. But, you know, as you're having to delay, sometimes you can kind of lose touch with that, and it's like, oh, well, does that really need to change? And, you know, so how do you kind of avoid drinking the Kool-Aid, as it were, in that kind of group think about, well, this is the way we've always done it.
Right.
Do you want me to do that?
Sure.
I can do that.
Yeah.
So for me, I've been trying to change my website for 9 years. I'm not even lying, you know, it's awful. And one of the things that happened to me about 3 years in, I was done, I was sick of it, I just couldn't keep going and asking for money every year, and they kept telling me no, and it wasn't that much. And I think it became me, actually. I had to look inside, and I had to be inspiring for my team and keep myself inspired. It's hard. It's not an easy thing to do. But going back and saying, okay, I'm not going to give up on this one, even though it's taking me years and years of laying groundwork to get forward. It's, again, okay, it might be a baby step, but what is that baby step? And I'm going to go back to celebrating the success when you reach that, the first step on this very, very long journey that isn't going to end right away.
I think, you know, for us, again, like our website process was close to 3 years. And I had to keep reminding myself why it was important. It helped that, you know, there were serious issues that would happen with our website. I mean, one of the best things that could ever happen was the day that we were announcing our season, the website crashed. And we also happened to have a board meeting that day. And so I was able to go into the board and say, so we were announcing our season today, and you may have noticed there was a delay in the announcement. That's because our website crashed. By the way, I've been talking to you about we need a new website.
Right.
So, but I think that I'm not shy. I think that, and I didn't. I mean, fire me. I'm not, fire me if you don't want a new website, because anyway. But no, I think that you have to keep reminding yourself, and I think you have to remember. I mean, like for me, he's in the room and he hasn't heard me say this, but I had a really hard time looking at Richie every day, knowing what he was going through, and not being able to get a new website, and knowing how challenging and difficult his job was. So that was a constant reminder for me to keep motivated to do that. And there were a lot of other things that came my way that I had to deal with that weren't even related to the new website, but I had to keep it paramount in my mind. And every time I would see Richie, I'd be like, get that website. So I think it's about constantly reminding yourself too.
Okay. Oh, it's working now. Okay, so I have found that fostering change institutionally is increasingly difficult the further down you are in the power structure of your organization. So
Yes.
I guess sort of two-part question. Number one, what are your strategies for empowering the people that you supervise to keep generating these ideas for change, but also what advice would you give to those of us who are middle management or lower, who just keep running into walls, but also maybe don't have board access or even access to executive leadership?
So I am definitely not a fan of the old suggestion box thing, because the suggestion box is really a bitch box, and I'm not really interested in that. So what I do though is I really try to utilize my staff meetings as the platform to engage everybody, because here's the issue that we have. We have the we-they issue. You got the administrative folk, right? And we're in a different building. And then you've got the people who are on the floor, who are with the guests, who are dealing with people who walk up to you and say, can I touch your hair? Just all sorts of craziness that they have to deal with. So trying to bridge that. And what I've tried to do is on issues that are relating to the entire museum, bringing people together, breaking them up into work groups, working with people who they don't typically interact with, and giving them a task. So recently, because of the strategic plan, one of the one of the most hurtful things I think I heard during the planning process, because I take my people so seriously, is that the values that we said were our values meant nothing because we weren't using them. And so I went home and just cried myself under the sofa. Then I said, okay, pick yourself up and figure out what you're going to do about this. So we got everybody together. I asked my senior team members not to say anything, just be scribes, and let people think through what they believe our values are and why some of the values that we should have, we don't have. So that was where I started. Then what we've begun to do is figure out what types of projects, opportunities are there for people to create and say, look, have you ever thought about this? So we're looking at a renovation of one of our 2 buildings, and we've asked everybody to give us their thinking on what the renovation should entail, because actually they're the ones who are welcoming our guests into the museum. They're the ones who have to say, oh, well, the bathroom is like 5 blocks away. Or they're the ones who have to say, well, no, there's no food to be had around here. So what are the things that you think are important? So for me, it's about having opportunities for everybody to be together, for people to work with different people, not staying in work groups, not staying with the administrative people, and sometimes putting you in some uncomfortable situations and circumstances, working with people that I know you're not that interested in working with. And then I allow that to kind of percolate up, and they hold me accountable to ensure that I am communicating back to them after staff meeting, well, what was it that we talked about? What are the next steps that we're going to take? So that's the way I have done it. I tend to be open to most conversations with anybody in the organization, as long as it's not on the side of human resource stuff. I don't like to get in the middle of my senior managers with their staff. But when it comes to projects and work and thoughts and ideas, everybody works there. We are a team. We're not a family, we're a team. And I want all of the team members to have a say.
I would also say, as far as like how do you like if you're like in the middle of the organization, try and use the same tactics like I was talking about, like with building the case, or understanding really why your manager might have resistance to something. And I would ask that question, well, what is your resistance to this? Why, and hopefully that manager will be open to answering that question. But I would say, can I try to prove to you why I think we should be doing this, or why this change needs to happen? Can I at least try to break down some of those barriers and some of that resistance? At least give me the chance or the opportunity to do that. And I would hope, like any good manager should say yes to that. So.
Oh, yeah, I think we're out of time. That's why. Yeah.
I think we're out of time.
We are out of time.
Hello.
And I say thank you.
But thank you to all of these incredible panelists.